Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries, and I thank you for joining me for Thursday's edition of End of the Age. Now, I'm going to talk today about a subject on everyone's mind. We're getting inundated with calls and emails from really around the world about North Korea and what's going on. And so I'm going to talk to you today about North Korea and Iran from a biblical perspective, from a prophetic perspective. Now, you might be saying, well, hold on a minute. North Korea and Iran, what do they have to do with each other? Well, if you talk about one, you have to talk about the other because they are working hand in hand as partners to get a nuclear weapon. In their quest for nuclear weapons, they've signed agreements. They're working hand in hand and have been doing so for years. And so we're going to talk about it today because you can't talk about one without talking about the other. North Korea and the Middle East. And we know what's going to happen in the Middle East because of the Sixth Trumpet War. So let's start off with the Sixth Trumpet War because a lot of people are questioning about that. The Sixth Trumpet War. Could this conflict with Korea end up in the Sixth Trumpet War? Well, the Sixth Trumpet War, when we refer to that, that's found in Revelation chapter 9, verse 13 through 19, and it states this: "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet." Now, you understand the structural element of the book of Revelation, the seven trumpets. Well, the first five trumpets have already occurred, and the sixth trumpet is one of the next prophecies to occur on God's prophetic timeline. So, verse 14 says, "Saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men." Some translations say 1/3 part of mankind. "And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat upon them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth, and of brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. And by these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth, and in their tails. For their tails were like unto serpents, and as heads, and with them they do hurt. From this we know three things. A war is coming that will kill 1/3 of all of mankind. As sure as we got up this morning and the sun came up, there's a war coming that will kill 1/3 of mankind. Number two, this war will begin in the area of the Euphrates River. The Euphrates River region, which flows through Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And number three, this war will involve an army of 200 million soldiers. Now, on top of Revelation chapter 9, which talks about the Sixth Trumpet War, the Bible also says in the end time there will be wars and rumors of wars. It's Matthew chapter 24, verse 3 through 6. And it's the Olivet Discourse. And in verse 3 of Matthew chapter 24, the Bible says, "And as he," or Jesus, "sat down on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the age. The King James Version says world, but the original Greek was aion, which is the end of this age. And verse 4 says, "And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." So in light of Bible prophecy, we know that there will be wars and rumors of wars in the end time. And one of those wars will be the Sixth Trumpet War, which we know that originates in the Middle East, and yet there will be other wars that will not be the Sixth Trumpet War. For example, we're fighting in Syria today, but that hasn't resulted in the Sixth Trumpet War yet. So we could have conflicts and different things around that could be considered a war, but not necessarily result in the Sixth Trumpet War. So we could go to war with North Korea, let's say, and it not result in the Sixth Trumpet War, because Jesus specifically said that there would be wars, plural, and rumors of war. So I'm not saying that we're going to go to war with North Korea. We don't know that right now. But the Bible does say that there will be wars, not a war, but wars, plural. So more than one. So Revelation 9, 13 through 16, it does not explicitly state that this war will be nuclear either. But the results of the war really indicate that it will pretty much have to be. The Sixth Trumpet War is what I'm referring to. Revelation 9:15 states, "So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour, a day, a month, and a year, were released to kill a third part of mankind." Now, the prophecy states that a war is coming, which is going to kill 1/3 of mankind. Taken it really at face value, this means that with today's the global population, 2.5 billion people will die in this war. Now, there's only one weapon presently available to mankind that could wreak this level of death and devastation. It's the nuclear bomb. Imagine going with tanks to kill 2.5 billion people. It's not possible. Look at all the firepower that was in World War II, and 8.52 million were killed. I'm talking about in this war 40 plus times World War II. So with that said, knowing that the Sixth Trumpet War is going to be a nuclear conflict, with that said, let's discuss the North Korean-Iranian partnership on nuclear weapons. Because like I said, if you talk about one, you've got to talk about the other. The Washington Times reports that Iran gets North Korean expertise in building up, testing, and hiding its ballistic missiles. You say, well, hold on a minute. I thought Iran was under sanctions and that President Obama, the Obama administration, signed a nuclear pact with them where they were going to kind of, not produce nuclear weapons and this, that, and the other. Well, if you've got a neighbor who can produce them for you, you can say, okay, I'll sign anything you want to. We're just going to give money to another country to help us do this. We're going to work in partnership. Well, that's what's going on with Iran and North Korea. Iran has increased production and testing of ballistic missiles since the 2015 nuclear deal with the U.S. while playing permanent host to scientists from North Korea, which has the know-how to build and launch atomic weapons. A leading Iranian opposition group has said on Tuesday. The National Council of Resistance of Iran issued a white paper that the dissidents say identifies and documents work at 42 missile centers operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corporation, the Guard Corps. This is the regime's dominant security force. A dozen sites have never been disclosed before, said the council, which operates a spy network that has exposed Iran's hidden nuclear program. Tehran views expertise from North Korea as being so critical that it has established residences in Tehran for Pyongyang scientists and technicians, according to this white paper. North Koreans have shown Iran how to dig tunnels and build missile cities deep inside mountains to prevent destruction by airstrikes, among other projects. So they state that on the basis of specific intelligence, the IRGC's missile sites have been created based on North Koreans' models and blueprints. So they're working hand in hand here. North Korean experts have helped the Iranian regime to build them underground facilities and tunnels to produce, store, and maintain missiles have also been modeled after North Korean sites and were created with the collaboration of North Korean experts. Iranians also are traveling to North Korea, which uses occasional missile test firings to rattle its neighbors, South Korea and Japan, which are true strong U.S. allies. They're kind of mocking them and saying, hey, look, we're testing these, and it's actually for us and Iran. In the context of these trainings and relations, the delegations of the IRGC's aerospace constantly travel to North Korea to exchange knowledge and information and the achievements with North Korean specialists. The North Korea's experts constantly travel to Iran, while the IRGC's missile experts visit North Korea. They're working back and forth. Even though now they're both under sanctions, they're still working back and forth to produce nuclear weapons. At a press conference Tuesday, Alireza Jafarzadeh, the Council's deputy director in Washington, displayed satellite photos that he said clearly showed trademark North Korean mountain entrances to cities that hold hundreds of missiles in Iran. So this North Korean situation is not isolated, everybody. North Korea and Iran are partners in the drive for nuclear weapons. And the reason that I'm wanting to tell you this and get this across to you is because while we may be focusing on North Korea, and there may be a conflict there in the future, I don't know, nobody can predict that, what Kim Jong-un is going to do. But one thing we watch for and looking at from a prophetic standpoint is Iran getting nuclear weapons. If North Korea does, in essence, Iran will have as well. And the Bible says the sixth trumpet war is going to emanate out of the Middle East region. Imagine the #1 supporter of terror in the world getting nuclear weapons. Imagine Hezbollah gaining access to a nuclear weapon. So you can see why the Trump administration is saying, hey, we're watching both of these and we can't let either one of them. They just sanctioned both of them, Iran and North Korea. And so you say, well, why? What's such the drive for nuclear weapons? Well, one of the main reasons for the drive to obtain nukes by Iran and North Korea is that they saw what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. The BBC reported that North Korea learned from Iraq and Saddam Hussein's mistake was that that Saddam Hussein did not possess the weapons of mass destruction he was falsely accused of having. And then Libya also taught them a similar lesson. So North Korea is sitting back and saying, look, we know what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, and we're not going to let that happen to us. So we need to get nuclear weapons so the United States and NATO forces can't come in here and pull us out of power. And then, so that's North Korea. Then The Guardian reports that whatever one thinks of Iran, the signal the U.S. has sent to the world is unmistakable. Any rational government should acquire nuclear weapons. The Iranians undoubtedly watched the U.S. treatment of two dictators who gave up their quest for nuclear weapons, Iraq's Saddam Hussein and Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, and drew the only reasoned lesson. The only way a country can protect itself from U.S. attack other than full-scale obeisance is to acquire nuclear weapons. Now, they're saying, this is the BBC, that's what they're saying that Iran got from this. and that is precisely why the U.S. and Israel are so eager to ensure they do not get nuclear weapons. So both North Korea and Iran have both looked at the Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and said, can't do that. Why? Because both Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi were removed from power and murdered in Iraq and Libya. And North Korea and Iran both sat back and looked at that and said, can't happen here. And you wonder why they're driving to get nuclear weapons. That's one of the big reasons. So let's talk about North Korea. It's on everybody's mind right now. What's really going on with North Korea? Well, The Blaze reports that some things that we need to know about in the continuing North Korea nuclear situation. I wanted to go over this because I want to make sure we understand what's happened over the last month and a half. And you say, well, could this result in a conflict? There's nobody on earth that knows 100% today, yes, this will end up in a conflict. Nobody knows that. If Kim Jong-un, he's been talking about shooting missiles at Guam. If he hit Guam with missiles, we're in absolute total conflict tomorrow morning, I promise you, if not this evening. But the fact of the matter is, he hadn't done that yet. It's all threats at this point. Now, will Donald Trump say, hey, I don't care if you threaten us or not, we're done with that? And of course, he said the other day, you'll see us and we'll come at you with fire and fury. But at the end of the day, it hasn't happened yet. Something could happen and it blow over and go away, or we could be in full conflict tomorrow morning. I don't know that. But I want to make sure you understand what's happened over the last month and a half and how this thing has escalated. So really, over the last month and a half, the situation in North Korea has really deteriorated more and more. Any tensions between communist North Korea and the United States have grown as President Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump exchanged threats. We all heard them. With reports that Pyongyang now has the ability to strike the continental United States with an intercontinental ballistic missile. Tuesday's revelation that the Kim regime has developed a nuclear warhead small enough to fit into a missile, and Trump's declaration that any further threats from the Hermit Kingdom will result in fire and fury. The U.S. seems closer to war with North Korea than at any time since the July 1953 armistice halted the fighting in the Korean War. So let's discuss the situation in North Korea and the possibility of war. That's what we're all interested in. And really, how could it affect the United States? So a brief history of the conflict. All the way back on July 4th, the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un personally oversaw the launch of a Hwasong-14 ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, hailing it as a gift to America. What a gift. North Korea claimed the missile could reach as far as Hawaii or Alaska, and that it was in response to Trump saying a North Korean missile would never make it to American soil. Well, the following day, the U.S. and South Korea launched a joint precision guided missile test to show the possibility of a precision strike at the enemy leadership. The U.S. also released spy footage of Kim Jong-un walking around a Hwasong-14 launch site on July 4th. To the Koreans, he gave this to the Koreans with the express purpose of sending the message to Kim that he could die at the hands of the U.S. at any time. Then General Vincent K. Brooks, commander of the American forces in Seoul, warned North Korea that the only thing stopping the U.S. from going to war is really self-restraint, because they had every reason to. Then during a speech in Poland, we're moving along a timeline here, during a speech in Poland, Trump said that he is prepared to do some very severe things to North Korea over its very bad behavior. Meanwhile, the UN Ambassador Nikki Haley informed the UN Security Council that the U.S. was drafting a resolution that raises the international response against North Korea, but warned that the U.S. is willing to take other measures if diplomacy fails. talking about referring to military action at that point. So Haley said, well, we will use our considerable military forces. She specifically said that, if we must. So offers of peace were then ignored. At that point, Russia blocked a UN resolution calling for significant measures in response to North Korea's ICBM test. Moscow said that it could not confirm if the missile test was an ICBM or not. So South Korea's Unification Ministry offered to conduct military peace talks with North Korea. After a few days of silence, North Korea's state-run newspaper, the Rodong Sinmun, released an article lambasting South Korea for offering peace talks while they threatened military action. So regardless, South Korea said there is no deadline on the offer of peace talks. Then General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said during an interview with NBC's Andrea Mitchell that the U.S. hoped for peace over the next few months, but would not attempt to attain peace forever. Dunford said that a nuclear Korea would be unimaginable and stated that he would develop military options to make sure that it wouldn't happen. And now remember, they're looking at both Iran and North Korea. They're not just looking at North Korea. They've still got Iran in view. Remember, they just sanctioned both of them. So it's important that we know that Donald Trump and his administration, they're not just ignoring Iran and saying, we've got to look at Korea. Because remember, North Korea, yeah, they're an issue. I mean, obviously, if they get a nuclear weapon, they're an issue. But at the end of the day, Iran is the #1 sponsor of terrorism in the world. Imagine them getting nuclear weapons and then all of their terrorist organizations that they fund, one of them getting access. I mean, Israel, you know why? You wonder why Israel could never allow that to happen. Or NATO, or the United States, or any of the West, because they're the #1 sponsor of terror in the world. So they absolutely cannot allow that to happen. So they've got their eye on Iran while dealing with Korea, knowing that they're working hand in hand in the quest for nuclear weapons. So during an interview with Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency, a North Korean foreign ministry spokesman said, should the U.S. dare to show even the slightest sign of attempt to remove our supreme leadership, we will strike a merciless blow at the heart of the U.S. with our powerful nuclear hammer, honed and hardened over time. Intelligence officials said that they believe that Pyongyang was planning another ICBM test after the North Korean military was seen transporting equipment necessary for launching an ICBM from the western city of Kusong. So what's really going on here, if you really look at the situation, that North Korea is building up, they're pressuring, and they're saying, we're going to get these weapons. It's very important. We have to get nuclear weapons right now. We're working. And if you think about it, in looking at this in a big picture, if you look at a little bit of history, you know that Bill Clinton went in and gave them money to stop their nuclear weapon gaining nuclear power. And he went in and he gave them, I think it was like $5 billion back in the early 90s, 93, 94, 95, somewhere back in there. And he actually stepped to a podium, and I tell you what, let me play something for you real quick. I got it real quick on my phone, and I want to show you something, because this is what Bill Clinton said as a result of giving them money in an agreement that his administration signed to get them to stop North Korea's nuclear quest for nuclear power. Listen to this.
Before I take your questions, I'd like to say just a word about the framework with North Korea that Ambassador Gallucci signed this morning. This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other...
Did you hear that? He said that as a result of the money we're giving them, North Korea will freeze and dismantle its nuclear program. Now here we are in 2017, and I'm going to show you here in just a minute after the break that they are years farther ahead than we thought they were. So, you remember what happened then in 1994, and then do you remember what happened in 2015 when President Obama said, hey, we've made a nuclear pact with Iran, and we're going to, in essence, keep them from getting a nuclear weapon. We're not keeping them from getting a nuclear weapon. They're working with North Korea hand in hand in a quest for nuclear weapons. They both looked and saw what happened in Libya, and they both looked and saw what happened in Iraq and said, that will not happen in here. The United States will not come in and pull us out of power and murder our leaders and then try to install their type of regime to keep a United States grip on the Middle East or on North Korea. It's not going to happen here. So we're going to get our own weapons, and we'll never let the West come in, because Iran is trying to set up its own global power, per se. And so they're trying all in the Middle East to install their Sharia, or to Shiites all across the Middle East. And so that's what you're looking at right here. And Bill Clinton, he didn't solve anything. And what the Obama administration did in 2015, that's not solving anything. So we're looking at it here, and if you look at the grand scope, what's happening in all of this, the Trump administration is watching both of these entities and saying, look, North Korea, yeah, we've got to stop them, but Iran, we can't stop, we can't quit looking at them as well. So they're weighing both things here, and I know I'm coming up on a break, and so for those of you that would want to listen to the rest of the program, go to endtime.com, because I'll get off in the next segment into Iran and what's going on with them, because they're working hand in hand for the quest for nuclear weapons.
Through the years, we have seen God perform miracle after miracle at End Time Ministries, and we are trusting God for another season of miracles this summer. So we decided that we wanted to share our miraculous story and boost your faith by offering you one of our newest DVDs titled The Miracle Called End Time for free with any purchase of $29 or more. To request your copy, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and mention the code MIRACLE, or order online at endtime.com.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't have to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. This is your official invitation to join Judy and me for our 2017 Fall End Time Prophecy Tour. The trip of a lifetime is a severe understatement. If you could travel to any place on earth, your first choice should definitely be the Holy Land. There is simply no other place like it. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 for more information. Ask to speak to Holly or Jana about the tour.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So what happened next on our timeline with North Korea? Well, they upped the ante. The intelligence officials were proved correct days later when North Korea tested another Hwasong-14 ICBM. The missile landed in the East Sea off the coast of Japan, sending both South Korean and Japanese officials into emergency meetings. In response, South Korea and the U.S. conduct another joint precision missile test. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson condemned the launch and laid the blame of North Korea's continued advancement of the communist state's missile program on Russia and China, saying, as the principal economic enablers of North Korea's nuclear weapon and ballistic missile and development program, China and Russia bear unique and special responsibility for this growing threat to the regional and global stability. Trump verbally blasted China on Twitter for their soft-handed approach to reining in North Korea. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced that he and Trump agreed to take further actions against North Korea after the latest ICBM test, and both leaders agreed to take all necessary measures to protect Japan. So, in light of the threats against Alaska just a few weeks ago from North Korea, the U.S. military successfully conducted a test of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, or THAAD, over Alaska. The system is meant to intercept missiles out of the air, destroying them before they can reach their target, similar to Israel's Iron Dome. And so, after that, two U.S. officials confirmed that the North Korean missile test on July 28th, just a couple weeks ago, proved that the communist state was capable of hitting locations within the U.S., including Chicago and Denver. Well, of course, once we learned that, everything went, everybody started saying, whoa, hold on a minute. That's halfway across the United States. Now, according to experts, this put North Korea, here it is, 2 years ahead of where they were thought to be in terms of missile technology. 2 years ahead. And so that's very, very, very important, because once we found out, hey, they've got intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach Chicago, then everybody in the United States started saying, okay, now, who's North Korea again? Because, I mean, think about it. We live in Dallas. And so I'm talking about halfway across the United States. Well, as a result, the U.S. decided to punish North Korea. Trump reluctantly signed a sanctions bill against, here it is, North Korea and Iran and Russia. Why Iran? Because these guys know full well that North Korea and Iran are working together. Now, they said, we did Russia because of Crimea and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at it, North Korea and Iran, remember, working hand in hand on the quest for nuclear weapons. Trump sanctioned both of them. Trump called it seriously flawed, but it sends a clear message to Iran and North Korea that the American people will not tolerate their dangerous and destabilizing behavior. What's that behavior? The quest for nuclear weapons. The United States knows full well what's going on between them. There's no secret. Pyongyang declared Thursday that the U.S. and South Korea can count on more unexpected gift packages in response to the July 28 precision missile test. North Korea added that the U.S. mainland was on the knife's edge and death. Well, National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster said in an interview that a preemptive strike against North Korea was on the table and that Kim Jong-un should not sleep well at night. Then the UN Security Council unanimously voted to pass the single largest economic sanctions package ever leveled against the North Korean regime for consistent violation of UN resolutions. Well, then that brings us to what else? Threats of war. We can't let them continue on their quest for a nuclear weapon, because what happens if North Korea gets nuclear weapons? Iran has nuclear weapons. You see what I'm saying? This is the big picture here. This is the big scope of what's going on. And from a biblical perspective, from a prophetic standpoint, we know that if we were to get into a conflict with North Korea tomorrow, it's not the sixth trumpet war. Because remember what the scripture that I read in the beginning, it's got to emanate out of the Middle East region. But if we get into a conflict if tomorrow morning, let's say, Iran gets nuclear weapons, we're going to war. Let's just face it. If the United States don't go in and bomb Iran, Israel would. because they know Israel's a one-bomb nation. They know a nuclear weapon dropped in the middle of their country and they're done. So they're never going to allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. It's not going to happen. We'll go to war first. And so now, with North Korea on the verge of this, here comes the threats of war. North Korea vowed a 1,000-fold revenge against the United States for the UN sanctions. The Washington Post reported Tuesday that intelligence officials believe North Korea has a miniature nuclear warhead capable of fitting into an ICBM, or an intercontinental ballistic missile. So here we go. We said those intercontinental ballistic missiles could possibly reach Chicago. Well, now they've developed, they said, a nuclear weapon that could possibly fit inside one of those. So, while there have been no confirmed tests yet, North Korea claimed that they already have successfully tested a nuclear ICBM. That's huge news, folks, when you understand what they're wanting to possibly do with it. And, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily, hey, they're just out to bomb the United States. And I don't know if that'll ever happen. But the fact of the matter is, let Iran get a hold of one of them, and it'll be Katie bar the door at that point. At that point, Trump told reporters Tuesday that any further threats from the North Korea will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. Many of you heard that. And, you know, he actually had a pastor from here in Dallas tell him that he had God's approval to do that, to go in and hit them. Well, I don't know if that's God's approval or not, but, I mean, Donald Trump, I mean, he looks at that and he says, okay, but hey, if, you know, this guy is kind of on his a ministerial advisory council to him or something like that. And, you know, he may look at that and say, well, hey, if you telling me I got God's approval, I mean, we're fixing to go in and level the guy, because Trump has the temperament to do that. And we're not talking about the Obama administration anymore. We're talking about the Trump administration. So the Korean People's Army at that point announced yesterday that it was reviewing military options to form attack positions around the U.S. territory in Guam in order to send a stern warning to the United States. Yesterday, Defense Secretary James Mattis told North Korea that it needed to stand down immediately, and that any militaristic threat from the isolationist state would be outmatched by the U.S. both tactically and technologically. So these guys aren't messing around at this point. When you get Mattis in there, I mean, he's used to going in and taking care of business. It's not going to be like a Vietnam where we go take a hill and then give it back and this, that, and the other. It's not going to be anything like that. These guys are going to go in there with specific orders, and they're going to be given all the resources and the weapons that they need to take care of business. Then the Debka file reports that the U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis warned North Korea in the strongest terms again yesterday to stop any action that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. He said in a statement to the DPRK that they must choose to stop isolating itself and stand down its pursuit of nuclear weapons. This is what they're all concerned about. Not just because of North Korea, but because of Iran as well. The DPRK he stated, the DPRK should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and to the destruction of its people. Mattis pointed out that the DPRK regime's actions will continue to be grossly overmatched by the United States and would lose any arms race or conflict its initiatives. Mattis added that while the State Department was making diplomatic efforts, the United States and its allies have the most precise, rehearsed, and robust defensive and offensive capabilities on the earth. Pyongyang's growing nuclear capabilities, coupled with Kim's continued threats against the U.S., make war seemingly more likely in light of Trump's repeated statements that he will not tolerate a nuclear North Korea. Why can they absolutely not tolerate a nuclear North Korea? Because they know that North Korea and Iran are working hand in hand in their quest for nuclear weapons. Don't ever forget that and what's going on. And look at what's going on in the Middle East. I'm going to give you an update here in just a second. So my question is, and a question we're getting asked, if we went to war with North Korea, would it be the Sixth Trumpet War? No. How do we know? Revelation 9:14 states this. And it states, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. The Sixth Trumpet War will begin in the Euphrates River region, which brings us to Iran. Debka reports that the North Korea is at a nuclear threshold, but what about Iran? Remember, if you talk about North Korea, you got to talk about Iran. In a white paper published last week, the Japanese Defense Ministry concluded that there is evidence that North Korea had achieved miniaturization of nuclear weapons, meaning that it could build a nuclear weapon small enough to fit onto an intercontinental ballistic missile. They stated that North Korea's development of ballistic missiles and its nuclear program are becoming increasingly real and presenting an imminent problems for the Asia-Pacific region, including Japan, as well as the rest of the world. This was told by Japanese reports. The report caused more shock than it should have when it finally reached the world media on Tuesday, August 8th, just a couple days ago, because their U.S. intelligence sources were fully aware of what was going on, has been going on for some time. They know that they're now reporting that there may be as many as 60 nukes in the North Korean arsenal. Did you hear what I said? 60 nukes in the North Korean arsenal. You say, well, Dave, you just said we may never go to war with them. We might not. But the fact of the matter is that when North Korea, who's working hand in hand with Iran, who's the #1 supporter of terrorism in the world, when North Korea gets nuclear weapons, in essence, Iran has nuclear weapons. And would we be willing to go to war with Iran if they got nuclear weapons? Absolutely. If we knew they had nuclear weapons on their soil and that they're terrorist organizations that they fund worldwide, and they're trying to form a circle really around Israel in the Middle East right now, we would never let that happen. It's never, ever going to happen. So this is what we're talking about. Wars and rumors of wars prophesied in the Bible, and the Sixth Trumpet War just ahead.
Jesus prophesied 2 specific things would occur right before His second coming. In this lesson, this generation shall not pass. Irvin Baxter discloses what those 2 things are and what will happen. He also proves they are in the process of coming to pass right now. Are we the generation that shall not pass until the promise of Jesus' second coming is fulfilled? To find out, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or order online at endtime.com.
Through the years, we have seen God perform miracle after miracle at End Time Ministries, and we are trusting God for another season of miracles this summer. So we decided that we wanted to share our miraculous story and boost your faith by offering you one of our newest DVDs titled The Miracle Called End Time for free with any purchase of $29 or more. To request your copy, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and mention the code MIRACLE or order online at endtime.com.
So now it's believed by many that they could have, the Debka file reports, that North Korea could have as many as 60 of these nukes. But while all eyes were fixed on the burly dictator Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, hardly anyone noticed that North Korea and Iran, but there were those that noticed, but most of the news never reported on this. that North Korea and Iran this week signed a series of new military accords, which are no less dangerous really to world peace. Think about it, working hand in hand. And Parliament Speaker Kim Jong-nam, who is rated number 2 in the Kim regime, ended a 10-day visit to Tehran on Monday by inking the new agreements. His official errand in Tehran was to represent Pyongyang at the swearing-in ceremony of the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and inaugurate the new North Korean embassy building in the Iranian capital. But he came with a large delegation of North Korean military officers who spent hours in conference with the heads of Iran's nuclear and missile programs, as well as with leaders of the powerful Revolutionary Guard. The precise details of Pyongyang's continued contributions to the upgrade of Iran's technology in those areas, the nuclear areas, are under very close wraps. But for Kim, the important thing is Iran's multi-billion-dollar investment in the partnership in return for allowing Iranian engineers and scientists to work alongside North Korean experts in the two fields. Now, you got to listen at this, folks. This is very important. The irony is this, that while the Security Council unanimously approved tough economic sanctions estimated to cost North Korea about $1 billion in state revenue, for which President Trump praised the world powers, the UN Security Council, Kim has managed to lay his hands on enough cash from Iran to keep his nuclear and missile programs moving at a very good pace. How did he do that? They're under sanctions. It's going to cost North Korea $1 billion out of their economy. How did they lay hands on enough cash to keep their nuclear program moving forward? Well, some of that cash comes from the sanction relief the Americans and Europeans granted Iran for signing its 2015 nuclear deal. So do you remember when the Obama administration gave Iran $1.7 billion in cash for sanction relief? Well, it looks like that some of that money went to North Korea to help fund their nuke program. Now, how ironic is that? And now the Wall Street Journal reports that Iran is using Syria to advance toward the Mediterranean Sea. So now, if you look what's going on, Iran, North Korea, working hand in hand to for their quest for nukes. And now we've been focused on North Korea. Everybody was focused on Syria there for a while. ISIS. Well, now you've noticed in the news, ISIS has kind of went off of the front page, let's say. And now it's all North Korea. Well, what was Iran doing this whole time? Well, they've been advancing their agenda. How? They're trying to form a land corridor from Iran, across Iraq, across Syria and Lebanon, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, right on the north doorstep of Israel. Now, can you imagine the travesty of that? But it's happening. The Islamic State, this is written by Naftali Bennett. And he states that the Islamic State needs to be stopped, but Tehran or Iran is a far more menacing strategic threat. Now, this is, like I said, it's written by Naftali Bennett, who's the Education and Diaspora Affairs Minister of Israel and is a reserve major in the Israel Defense Forces General Staff Reconnaissance Unit. He states this: Hezbollah announced last month that it had captured the Syrian-Lebanese border around the Jarod Arsal from Islamic State forces. Far from being a minor development in a violent and unstable region, this marks another Iranian success in its quest for power dominance across the Middle East. Now, imagine if they had, keep in mind, if they had nuclear weapons. The number one sponsor, again, of terrorism in the world, on the very north doorstep of Israel. So since its 1979 revolution, Iran has sought to become a dominant world power capable of imposing Islamic rule on as many people as possible. The Iranian regime finances and supports armed militias in other countries and is the world's top exporter of terror. Everybody knows that. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans have died at the hands of Iran's terrorist proxies. An essential part of Tehran's grand strategy is to control a land corridor. Now, here's what we're talking about. The land corridor from Iran to the Mediterranean Sea, where they could get weapons and different things back and forth, and under the protection of their military. And so under the cover, really, of Syria's bloody civil war, which has been going on for the last several years, Hezbollah is helping to build such a highway. Hezbollah, trained and supported by Tehran, is classified as a terror group by the United States and France and the Arab League and many others. Its effort endangers the entire Western world. Really, controlling this corridor would directly connect Iran and its proxies in Syria and Lebanon, allowing it to transfer advanced weapons cheaply and quickly, i.e., nuclear weapons. Think about that. Think about them being on the doorstep of Israel with a nuke. It's not going to happen. We'll be in war tomorrow morning before that happens. And Israel has already bombed several of these military weapons shipments and things. Well, imagine if they were trying to bring nuclear weapons in. You're not talking about just going in and strategically bombing somebody at that point. We're going to war. And so the Bible, remember, the Bible says, we talked about it in the beginning, the sixth trumpet war. It's going to emanate out of the Middle East region. And when the smoke clears, 1/3 of the world's population is going to be destroyed. Now, North Korea, if it starts tomorrow morning, it's not going to, from all that we can see, it would not be the sixth trumpet war because it has to emanate out of the Middle East region. But Iran, that's why I wanted to tie North Korea and Iran in together. Iran getting nuclear weapons, the United States nor Israel ever going to allow that to happen, because Iran has said many times, we want to drive Israel off into the sea. We want to destroy the Jews. I mean, so would you allow somebody like that to get a nuclear weapon? Never. So the highway which Iran is trying to build from Iran to the Mediterranean Sea would let Iran build its military presence on the Mediterranean, bringing really much of Europe into the range of its Air Force, Navy, and mid-range missiles. Iran could even build arms factories outside of its borders. So Iranian apologists, they frame Hezbollah's capture of the border area as a victory over ISIS, as if the U.S.-led coalition ought to be cheering for that. Now, ISIS needs to be stopped. That's true. But Naftali Bennett says Iran is a far greater problem in the long run. They all know they're trying to get nuclear weapons. And Tehran shouldn't be mistaken for part of the solution for ISIS. Naftali Bennett is saying that's a whole different ballgame. And as Syria disintegrated through civil war, Iran acted swiftly. Iran broke international law and forcefully expelled the Sunni population and replaced it with Shiites. This changed the local demography to support Tehran's planned land corridor through Syria and Iraq. Iran also sent its generals to train Bashar Assad's troops. And Hezbollah has effectively morphed from a terror group into a division of the Iranian army, working for Tehran not only in Lebanon but in Syria. And both of them are also in Yemen and Iraq. So you see how Iran's kind of surrounding Israel here. And they're going to be one of the main entities that comes down against Israel at the Battle of Armageddon. And so we're really watching this and what's going on here. And then, so if you think about it, in the game of really chess that Syria has become, because there's so many world players there, Western leaders are so focused on the knight attacking their pawns in that area that they can't see the queen maneuvering to defeat them. i.e., Iran's land corridor. Mistaking ISIS as the most serious threat has allowed Iran to move its pieces forward and gain better position. And the nuclear deal Iran signed in 2015, it demonstrates Tehran or Iran's patience, because it temporarily slows the country's preparations to acquire nuclear weapons without stopping them over the long term. And so that's why we've got the United States. Like I said, Donald Trump is sitting back watching Korea, and he's watching Iran. And he's trying to weigh all this stuff out. He's been in office, what, 7 months now, almost 8 months. About 7 months now. And so he's watching all this stuff, and he's got his military leaders coming to him and say, hey, we're looking at North Korea. There's a huge issue here, but we've also got to watch Iran at the same time, because these guys are partners. Now, Naftali Bennett goes on to say, I and others are concerned by the ceasefire in southern Syria brokered by the U.S., Russia, and Jordan last month. With American and allied forces present in the north, Iran has focused its efforts in the south. The hiatus, they actually were trying to build this corridor, and we moved a lot of U.S. military up there. And so they diverted this land course like 140 miles out of the way to try to divert our U.S. forces to keep moving with this land corridor. So they pulled out all the stops, and they're trying to get this to happen. And so the hiatus from violence in that region only gives Tehran another piece of territory in its bid to build a highway all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. It will take time and patience to stop Iran. The international community needs to defeat Tehran wherever its forces advance, in cyberspace, in battlefields, in Yemen and Iraq, and in advanced laboratories. This effort will be both public and covert. Now, it's very important that everybody understands, I'm coming up to the end of the program here, but I want you to understand that this is why we look at these things from a biblical perspective, because it gives us direction. And this is why we teach. We're on the radio, television, we're in End Time Magazine and all over the internet, put out so many products. We're trying to help people prepare themselves mentally, physically, and spiritually, mentally and physically for the next few years, and spiritually for eternity. So if you'd like to join us, to partner with us, to purchase some of our products, if you want to educate yourself, to help prepare yourself for what's coming, go to our web store, endtime.com, because these things are coming down. And the Bible says in the end, Jesus said there will be wars and rumors of wars, and the sixth trumpet war, which will emanate out of the Middle East, will be, it's one of the next two events besides the peace agreement to occur on God's prophetic timeline. So join with End Time Ministries as we use current events to show how prophecies written 2,000 to 2,500 years ago are coming to pass right now.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.